Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 2, which is lesson 2 in your workbook. In this lesson, what you will focus your attention on is the laws and beyond the laws relating to the DWI. So we will discuss the DWI, the penalties, the sanctions, punishments, and the loss or reinstatement of driving privileges. We will begin with the laws. There are 2 categories of offenses. These categories are listed on page 20 of your workbook. The first category is the misdemeanor. This category applies to a lot of the DWI cases. In some states, someone under the age of 21 with a blood alcohol level of 0.02 to 0.04 can be charged with a traffic infraction. The next category is the felonies. This involves alcohol or other drugs in which serious body injury or death has resulted. In some states, the felony is charged if a driver have had a great deal of DWI offenses, but there was no body injury or death related to the DWI. So in other words, you can get a felony if there's body injury or death to another individual, or if there is a situation where you have accumulated a number of DWIs. We're now on page 21. There are the presumptive and the per se categories. Number 1, the DWI presumptive requires the observation of a clear lack of mental judgment or physical control that makes safe operation of a motor vehicle impossible due to AOD use, that's alcohol or other drug use. Now, the BAC, which is the blood alcohol concentration, is at 0.8 or greater. Once again, the blood alcohol level or concentration must be at 0.08 or greater. Now, the persons who normally notice the behavior of driving erratically, the police officer will stop a person if they find the blood alcohol concentration at 0.08. You can be arrested. Now, the next category is DWI per se, or driving with excessive content. Involves an alcohol level greater to or equal to 0.08 and does not require that erratic driving be observed. So you can just be stopped and the police officer notice the smell of alcohol, asks you to step out of the vehicle, does a breathalyzer test, and find that your level of alcohol is at a BAC of 0.08 or greater. Now we're going to discuss the BAC levels. Now the BAC levels varies in different states. So it's a good thing to investigate what the BAC level is legally within the state that you live. Now, the national standard, however, is 0.08. Some states will place it at 0.10. A few states have a lesser charge in which the BAC is set at 0.05. Most states have a zero tolerance law for drivers under the age of 21. Now, this zero tolerance is generally at 0.02, and the states will consider this the legal level for which a DWI can be assessed and charged. There are 4 outcomes to any charges that's listed above. It could be conviction, a deferred judgment or sentence in the misdemeanor or traffic infraction areas. It could be a plea of nolo contendere. So in other words, that's no contest, in which the misdemeanor or traffic infraction areas are given for a first-time offender, or it could be a finding of not guilty. Now, in most states, who governs the DWI is the question. Now, you have 2 separate legal agencies or authorities that can impose sanctions upon you in situations like this. Now, a lot of times it involves education, that is AOD education, that means alcohol or drug education, or treatment. And who will do the imposing? A lot of times it's the court system and the Department of Motor Vehicles. They can do it separately or they can do it together. Now we're moving over to page 22. And we're going to discuss the different actions that can be taken in situations of the DWI situation. And so we will begin with the court system and the court actions that can be taken. The courts can impose these sanctions: fines, restitution, or community service, specialized drunk driver cash funds, jail or incarceration, probation, evaluation for AOD use and driving problems. Also, the court can make a decision whether or not they're going to impose education, treatment, or a combination of both. Now, education alone can happen in various states, and they have different levels of education that they may impose upon you. Also, the education can be coupled with treatment. The education is directly related to the alcohol and drug use, and you may have to attend both education and treatment programs. Treatment is of different length and intensity. It could be outpatient treatment or it could be inpatient treatment, depending upon the severity of the situation. When you are receiving treatment, it will include a psychological assessment, medication for alcohol and drug control may be given. It will include random urine and breath screening or testing. You may be exposed to victim impact panels, ignition interlocks, self-help or mutual help, support groups such as AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or NA, Narcotics Anonymous. If required, opiate maintenance may be imposed. Other additions could include vehicle impoundment or immobilization. So if your car is impounded or immobilized, this must be imposed by the court. Also, you may be put on electronic monitoring. Now, that is what the court can do. Other actions can come from the Department of Motor Vehicle. They may impose suspensions for first-time DWI offenders. Also, you may receive points against your license and may include a time period up to 1 year. We're on now page 23 of the workbook. The Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, can revoke your license. There could be administration license revocations, and they are tied with DWI per se laws. It means that a law enforcement officer can require a blood, breath, or some other urine test if he suspects that there's been a DWI. If you refuse to take the test, or having a test result equal to or greater than the DWI per se levels, it can result in your license being revoked. The next thing that can happen is a restricted or probationary license can be given at the time that you lose your normal license, your regular license. There are limits that's imposed if you receive a restricted or probationary type of license. And the restrictions can be imposed according to the state and what they mandate. In many states and across the states, it will be known that you have received a DWI conviction because it stays on your record for the lifetime that you hold a license. You will be required to be reinstated. So that means you must have proof of insurance, payment of the reinstatement fee, and successful completion of the required AOD education or treatment program. Also, if imposed, the ignition interlock must be placed on the car, and that carries a monthly fee. Now, let's talk about the impact that can happen across the states. The states have an interstate driver's license compact, which is an agreement between states to honor restraints and actions that's taken by another state. So these states will honor the DWI education and treatment requirements of participating states. Offender can move from one state to another, but must provide proof of completing the education and treatment requirements if they are to receive a license and before reinstatement is granted. Now, the education and the treatment requirements are very similar, but may be somewhat different in different states. So the education, once again, is alcohol and drug education, and the treatment could be inpatient or outpatient treatment. Most states have 3 conditions that determine what level of education and treatment a person must receive. And it's according to the BAC at arrest, the prior DWI convictions, and whether or not the person have a AOD problem that requires treatment. Now, we are on page 24, and you have an exercise to do. The exercise is based on the chart that's in the textbook or the workbook on page 25. And it tells you in the first column of the last row, write the description of the program you are in. In the second column, write in your BAC at arrest and the number of your prior DWIs, if you've ever been convicted of any one of these things. Now, in the third column of the last row, write in the number of hours and weeks of education you have to complete. In the fourth column, write in the number of hours and weeks of treatment. And if you have none, just place a 0 there. In the fifth column, write in the combined number of hours and months of education and treatment you are required to complete. That's what you need to do as far as the chart is concerned. And the chart, once again, is on page 25. Now, based on your history of impaired driving behavior, do you feel as though you were treated fairly? Well, if not, tell me why. And then you can always send a response to safedriving1020@gmail.com. So send me an email. Tell me why you don't feel as though you were treated fairly. It's confidential. It will be placed in your file. Now, the next thing is check off one of the check-off statements on page 24. It says, I got off easy and should have been given more education and treatment. I was given what was fair based on my DWI history. I was given more education and treatment than I deserved. And this is based on what was imposed upon you, of course. And it's basically opinion-based because you know that if the court requires that you meet these obligations, although you may decide if you want to or not, that's truly up to you. But if you decide to stay and receive these services, please complete it, because your documentation is given to your attorney, your parole probation officer, and to the judge. We're at the bottom of page 25. Now, once again, there are different types of penalties that can be imposed, and it will vary from state to state. It all depends on which state you're residing in. Because this is an online education workshop segment, of course, the laws will be different from state to state. So know what your laws are in your particular state once again. The workbook focuses on Colorado. But if you're living in Maryland or New York or California, Florida, guess what? The information is good that you are receiving, but you must follow the laws of your state. Now, you have another exercise to do, and it's in Table 2. So let's look through our book and find Table 2. Table 2 is on page 26 of your workbook. Now, this is based on Colorado, and for the purpose of this class, we will do the requirement. However, all you have to do is in the last row of Table 2, write in your offense, the hours of community service that must be completed, your fine, your jail sentence, or anything that's related to the DWI offense, and ask yourself, were you treated fairly, yes or no? And so there is a blank space that you complete at the bottom of the table. Now, also, we are going to start with the following table and put the DWI offense you wrote in at the bottom of Table 2. Then put the BAC level at the time of your arrest. Write down what offense you were convicted of under A of the outline, and then write down your BAC level. Under B, what are the specific legal requirements or sanctions given to you by the court or DMV? And that is a part of worksheet 3, which is on page 32. Now, if you have further questions on the lines below, write down these questions. Then using worksheet 3 and what you have written below, you can just complete the work. Now, look on page 27, and this is where you write down any questions you may have about your situation. So that's at the top of page 27 once again. So just take the time to do that. Now, that is all that's required for the first part of this session. This is lesson 2 in your workbook. We will take a break, and then I will come back and we will complete session 2, which is lesson 2 in your workbook, the second part. Enjoy the break.